Welcome everybody. 21 days till election day. So thank you for tuning in. Welcome to Big Tent USA. Big Tent USA is a national women-led pro-democracy advocacy organization promoting civic engagement through education and activism. Today we're going to hear from Diana Robinson. She's the Civic Engagement Director of Make the Road, Pennsylvania. I know some of you guys are writing letters while you listen, which is awesome. If you need some more letters, today we're working with Vote Riders campaign in Pennsylvania. So feel free to just put something in the chat and Vanessa can get you a link so you can print out some more letters. It's super easy, so important as you all know. So thank you for doing that. So hello, Diana. Thank you so much for joining us. First, a little background on Diana. Before joining I'm going to read this if you guys don't mind because there's a lot of details. Before joining Make the Road PA, Diana was an activist, organizer, and educator. She worked at the Food Chain Workers Alliance, a coalition of worker-based organizations whose members plant, harvest, process, pack, transport, prepare, serve, and sell food, organizing to improve wages and working conditions for all workers along the food chain. Prior to that, she was an organizer and food policy coordinator at the United Food and Commercial Workers Union Local 1500 in Long Island. She's a labor educator and trainer, teaching and facilitating courses at SUNY Empire State College. Diana graduated from Queens College with a BA in poli-sci and completed a master's in labor studies from CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies. In 2020, she was recognized by New York City and State as a rising leader in labor and urban studies. She's the daughter of immigrants from the Caribbean, and we welcome her here today. Again, thank you for joining us. Before you start your fabulous presentation, I just thought it'd be good to put it into context of why Big Tent USA is focusing on Pennsylvania. You may all know all this, but I just thought I'd remind you. It's a big state. There are 20 electoral college votes. There's a race for governor, senator, there is lieutenant governor, 17 House seats, that's a lot. It is the current focus of attempts by insurrectionist Republicans to undermine our democracy. You can Google Rep. Mike Kelly, who sued to void Pennsylvania's mail-in ballots. You can look at attempts to create a separate slate of electors in favor of Donald Trump. That's just the tip of the iceberg. It's a very interesting state with a lot of insurrectionist people and a lot of good people who care about democracy like Diana. So don't get depressed because today we're going to hear from Diana and she's doing such amazing positive work that while you're writing your letters and doing all that great activism, I hope you will absorb the hope and the promise that is presented here by Diana and her work. So thank you, Diana. I will pass the mic over to you.
Thank you, Mary. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Diana. I'm so happy to be here with you and to share a little bit more about Make the Road and the work that we're doing. So Make the Road Pennsylvania is a community organization. We're in 3 cities across the state of Pennsylvania. We're in Allentown, which is part of Lehigh County. We're also in Northeast Philadelphia, and we're also in Reading. And our work year-round is really engaging with community around issues that are important to them. And civic engagement is one of the biggest programs that we run. We register voters, we do voter education, we train people to do poll site monitoring, but we also provide services for people who are interested in running for office. One of the biggest things that we were part of in the last 2 years was the redistricting process. And we're very proud to say that we were part of a broad coalition of partners in the state of Pennsylvania that was able to produce one of the most fair and equitable maps in the last 30 years in the state of Pennsylvania. They're not perfect, but they're a lot better than they were. And really for our members, which are 10,000 members across these 3 cities across the state of Pennsylvania, for our members, it was really important to be part of that process where they saw the census to then the redistricting process to then being able to elect candidates of choice. In Berks County, in House District 129, there's a great opportunity to elect a second representative, second Latino representative, the first Latina representative to the state house. So we're really excited about all these opportunities and really ensuring that the Pennsylvania electorate is reflective of Pennsylvanians. People of color now make up about 28% of the population in the state of Pennsylvania, and it's going to continue to grow. One of the largest growing populations in the state of Pennsylvania is the Latino community. A lot of our work focuses on the Latino community, but also the Black community, working class communities, and really ensuring that our folks are getting the information they need to be able to go out and vote and participate in our democracy that oftentimes has been exclusive of them. So it is our responsibility and our duty to do that, to be out there talking to our people. I'll share a little bit about myself. I'm originally from New York. I grew up in Brooklyn, East New York. A lot of people would describe it as a rough place to grow up. And I come from an immigrant family. My mother's from the Dominican Republic, and my dad is from a small island called Providence, which is part of Colombia, but it's very Afro-Caribbean culture. And both my parents immigrated to the United States, my dad in the 70s and my mom in the 80s. And I'm gonna just share a quick picture with y'all. Okay. So here on the right, that's me and my little sister Eileen, and my dad. And so that was us in our house in Brooklyn growing up. I'm missing my two front teeth. I was about 6 years old. And here on the left, it's probably flipped for you, but it's my mom, my sister, and me. And so for me, part of the civic engagement work is so important because the work that Make the Road Pennsylvania is doing is really ensuring that new citizens in this country have the information they need to participate in our democracy. My mom became a US citizen in the 90s, and I was there at her ceremony, and it was such a moment of pride for her. And that always stayed with me, that importance. And she's always voted since then, and it's been a big part of her identity and part of her community, and how important it is to participate in our democracy. And the same thing we're doing with our members across the state in Pennsylvania, ensuring that they have information to go out and vote, ensuring that they know where to vote, they know how to vote. Because again, oftentimes there was an article that came out recently from Y, which is the National Public Radio station here in Pennsylvania, talking about how Latino voters aren't being contacted, where they're not being connected with. And that's why organizations like ours exist, because we were already in these communities, and it's really important for us to ensure that people have what they need to go out and vote. Because oftentimes our people are the last to be touched, as you would say, when you're knocking on doors. So it's really important that we're out there early, talking to people, talking about the issues, that people know these are the positions that are up for election. These are what these positions mean, and this is the responsibility of that office, so that they feel informed and they feel ready to go and vote. So there's often these discussions about communities of color and young people, that they're apathetic, that they're not engaged, but honestly, the reality is that they're fed up, right? Oftentimes, their promises are made to these communities and they're not fulfilled. So they're critical thinkers, and they want to hear from candidates. They also want to hear about the issues and how these candidates are going to make our lives better. So I think it's our responsibility to be out there in the community, providing these resources and making sure everyone has this information so they can make the best choice when they're at the polling booth. So this is our group here. We were in DC advocating for immigration reform, for a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented Americans living in the United States. So a lot of our work is intersectional. We're talking about voting rights, but we also have many members who aren't able to vote in this country, but they still see the importance of people going out to vote. So they're still knocking on doors. They're still making phone calls to ensure that their neighbors and other community members are out there ensuring that people are practicing this right to vote. To date, we've registered close to 7,000 people across the state, new registrants that we're going to turn out to vote. Our goal is to knock on over 50,000 doors. That's on our nonpartisan side to ensure that people get out the vote, go out and vote. We've heard the importance of this election over and over again, but in reality, in the state of Pennsylvania, it is a very important election, right? Especially the governor's election, right? The US Senate is really important. We have an opportunity there, but the governor's election is really important. And for us, we want to ensure that voters have all the information they need to make an informed decision when they go to the polling booth. I want to share a short video from an event we had recently. We're part of a national organization that's made up of 5 states, which include New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, New York, and Pennsylvania. And in September, we were able to come together, talk about all the work that we're hoping to do together in this election cycle, but also build community with each other and kind of have that joy of why we're doing this work and why it's so important. We heard such powerful stories from our members about talking to people about voting, knocking on doors, and feeling that sense of community, how important it is to be part of this larger community that's advocating for change. So bear with me for 1 second while I pull up the video. And I'm happy to answer questions after the video.
I am so excited to be here today with everybody. There's so much love and kindness that you do not get in other spaces unless it's the Make the Road family together.
I realize everyone here have one thing in common, which is immigrant status within our family.
A partir de la educación podemos tener un cambio. Para mí es la base de todo. Si no nos educamos, no logramos grandes cambios. Es súper importante salir a votar porque es la única manera en que nosotros podemos ejercer nuestros derechos y poder elegir a nuestros líderes políticos.
Our people are struggling and we need real people that will fight for us to make sure that we win big things.
Nuestra lucha sigue y no vamos a parar hasta que los que estén en poder nos respeten.
Día a día veo como las familias tienen muchas dificultades al acceso de cuidado de salud.
We need to make sure that we have candidates in place that will fight for us, that will listen to us, that will make sure that when we are asking for things that they deliver, and not just deliver on a piece of it, but the whole thing. And we are tired of making compromises when our people are really hurting.
Vamos a seguir empujando por lo que nuestra comunidad necesita para vivir dignamente. No vamos a permitir que los republicanos MAGA tomen el poder una vez más.
Y estoy luchando para la educación, para mejorar la educación de nuestros niños allá en Hartford, Connecticut, pero también me uno aquí para luchar para todas las personas acá en Pensilvania y para que los republicanos no bloqueen el proceso de las necesidades de las personas.
Vengo de Las Vegas, Nevada, y estoy aquí formando parte para empujar a la comunidad que se registren para votar, lo importante que es hacer los cambios para nuestra comunidad. Si nosotros alzamos la voz, si nosotros salimos a las calles a tocar las puertas, esas personas que antes no sabían que existe Make a Road van a saber.
Yeah, we're knocking on doors and to inform people about the election and who to vote for.
I started doing this work because there was really no other organization in my city, so I'm from Jersey. Now I'm the youth organizer. All this to say, I started off as a volunteer when I was 15, and now I work as the youth organizer.
Venimos de Las Vegas, Nevada. Nuestra primera vez haciendo canvassing, pero estamos aquí para hablar con la gente y asegurarnos que entren los demócratas a casa como tienen que ser, asegurarse que el voto latino sea escuchado.
A los políticos esto los conmueve también porque dicen, oh, existe una organización que está peleando por el inmigrante.
The pandemic really took being able to be in person together away from us. We haven't been together in over 2 years. And so to be able to be with members that I haven't seen since February 2020 is really moving, along with our members, the new ones, the ones that have been with us for years, over decades. It's been really exciting to be with everyone here today. I am so excited to be here today.
So yeah, that was an amazing event where we all came together and really saw our shared struggle, and that our sister organizations saw the priority of coming to Pennsylvania, knocking on doors and talking to people about voting, because we know how important this state is for the nation as a whole. And, you know, I shared that little bit about myself because this is why I'm so connected to this work as a daughter of immigrants, a first generation American. For me, it's so important to fight for our communities and to ensure that our voices are heard. But, you know, we're going to keep fighting, we're going to keep standing, and we're going to keep advocating for the things our communities need. But we need support of others to be able to do that. And so my mom always would call something a colecta, a collection, that whenever someone needed something, we would come together as family, community, to support, to make that happen. So I'm here today asking you to join our community and to join our organization in contributing to the change that we want to see in the state of Pennsylvania. We're not going to be able to make the changes that we want to see unless we can elect people who are going to be able to push that forward. We can advocate for all these changes all we want, but if we do not have people in office that can push forward these changes, we're not going to make it happen. So I'm asking you today to join us and join our community and support our work and help us continue to knock on thousands of doors, to talk to voters about how to mail in their vote, how to mail in their ballot, where they need to go to vote, if they need support in terms of language services, what they have to do to ensure they have that at their polling place, to have hotlines available when people are having issues at the polls. All these things are necessary to ensure that every person in Pennsylvania can access the ballot and vote freely, and also to have joy when people are voting. We want to ensure that no one is discouraged from voting, that everyone feels that pride and joy with participating in our democracy. So I hope that you all will join us and support our work. And again, thank you so much for having me here today.
Mary, you're on mute.
There we go. Thank you, Diana. That was fantastic. I love that video. Thank you all for the questions that are coming in. Before we get to questions sort of about the election specifically, I wanted to just ask you about the work, the sort of ongoing work that you do in communities that isn't just election related. And I think it's part of the power of your organization that you're really working in communities with all different ages throughout the year. So could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so we work on different issues throughout the year. So the way we kind of encompass all the work we're doing, we work on immigrant rights, both at the state level and federally, whether it's a campaign right now for driver's licenses for all or a pathway to citizenship at the federal level, supporting DACA. We also work on housing issues. During COVID, we saw things get even worse for our communities. So ensuring people have stable housing. We were part of making calls and canvassing so people could apply for rent relief. In addition to that, we're part of climate justice work. Just recently, we were able to be part of passing in the budget the Home Repairs Act, which helps homeowners be able to pay for repairs when their homes have been impacted by climate crisis, which is something that a lot of our members face. In Allentown, there's a lot of flooding and a lot of people's homes have been impacted, but they cannot afford the repairs. So this bill, there's about $125 million in this program that will support homeowners to be able to do that. In addition to that, we have a year-round core canvassing team In 2019, we made the decision that we wanted to keep these folks on because they were such a big part of our organization. They're from the community, they're trusted messengers, and it was so important to us to keep those folks on to continue doing that outreach year round, but also to develop members from our community in our organization and into leadership positions. 3 of those canvassers have moved on to be field coordinators, and it's amazing to see their journey. And that's so important to us, that year-round work and how it connects to the issues, because we see voting as a tactic in kind of participating in our democracy, but to build power, we have to continue to engage with our communities and also hold electeds accountable.
Is there, I know here in Connecticut, I'm always trying to get people to canvass. I love canvassing because I just think it's an awesome way to meet your neighbors and find out what people are thinking about, but there's so many people who are terrified of it. Do you find that to be true with the people you're working with, and how do you convince them like that it's fun and really effective?
Yeah, it can be hard. At the beginning, it's always hard. I was an organizer and I've had many doors slammed in my face, but I tell everyone that it's normal, that it's okay, that it's part of the job and not to take it personally. But I think our folks are so connected to these issues, and that's why when they're knocking on a door, they're talking about something that's so important to them that they want everyone to know about it and know how they can be part of it. So I think that's the difference. Is that people are doing this work because they're connected to these issues and they want to see this change. That is something personal and important to them. So that's why it's so important for us that we're always hiring from our community and ensuring that our folks who are knocking on doors are from the community and understand the issues that are happening in that community.
And where do most, there was a question, I think it was in the chat, but where do most people get their information about issues, about candidates? Excuse me.
Yeah, so in reality, it's not a monolith. Like, our communities get different sources of information, and also depending on the age, the demographics, people get their information differently. But we do know, like, within the Latino community, WhatsApp is a big place where people are communicating with each other, sharing information, Facebook. But we also have our comités, which are committees that meet weekly on Thursdays, where people are coming together to learn about issues, campaigns, and things like that. So that's one way that we are communicating around issues that are happening. And people watch the news as well. But it's so many different sources that it's hard to name like one source that people are getting their information.
But are you finding that misinformation is an issue that you have to address specifically?
Yeah, so we do address misinformation. We've done trainings around it, things like that. When things like that do come up, we are doing rapid response to it. Last year, for example, Berks County sent out the wrong date to return mail-in ballots in Spanish. So we had to do a lot of rapid response work to ensure people had the correct information. And also we made a request of the county that they honor those ballots that were returned later, but they did not agree to do that. But I think we are responding to that. But I do think that from the polling and information that we've been hearing, that misinformation narrative may be a little too, maybe more nuanced. I think that Latino voters and younger voters are critical thinkers, and they're voters that need to be persuaded. And oftentimes those communities are not part of those persuasion conversations. So that what we've found is that we need to be talking to people early. They want to know what's happening, and they don't want to be people who are reached out to in the last minute. They want to be informed. They want to be ready to participate and vote.
That's fantastic. I love that. Can you talk a little bit about are you dealing mostly with older people, younger people? Because we always hear like, oh, older people vote all the time, younger people not so much. So what are you seeing on the ground?
It's a mix, right? Our universe, we are targeting young voters, Latino voters. So we have a mix in terms of who we're doing outreach to. But just yesterday, I was participating in a panel at Temple University, and it was found that youth voters from 18 to 29 actually came out, 50% of them came out in the 2020 election. So there's been an increase in the youth vote, actually. So I think, again, it's thinking about how are we engaging with voters about issues that matter to them. And so for us, when we're having conversations, it's always important leading with hearing from the voter what matters to them, what's important to them, and not making assumptions. Because I think oftentimes we're making assumptions, whether it's young voters or Latino voters, and it's not a monolith, right? People have different things that move them. But what we've found, just like many other working class communities, Latino voters are concerned with the economy and jobs, safety, and gun violence.
Okay, so then the tricky question of abortion rights, right? Like Dobbs, which seems to be the driving issue for a lot of Democratic candidates. Obviously in the Latino community, that's a little bit of a tricky subject because some of the older people are more conservative. Are the younger ones worried about abortion rights, freedom, and how do you kind of sell that important freedom that's been taken away? How do you sell that to the older people in your community?
Yeah, interestingly enough, some polling that we've heard about from some partner organizations has found that reproductive rights is actually has been polling well with Latino voters, and that there's been a conversation around really like the person's right to choose, like that decision's between a woman and her doctor. Even anecdotally, in a conversation that we're having amongst our own canvassers, there are some people who are pro-choice, some were anti-choice, but they respected, or not pro-abortion and anti-abortion, but respected the right of each person to make that decision for themselves. That is kind of what's been coming up, like people should be able to make that decision for themselves.
I see. So it's like a liberty, freedom issue, as you know, freedom for women. So I from the video, I heard people talking about how education and healthcare were sort of the main issues, but you just said it was sort of the economy and gun violence.
Yeah, so in Pennsylvania specific.
Yeah.
So in the video, we did have 5 states there. So it was different states sharing about the issues that were important to their communities. But from the door knocking we've been doing, gun violence comes up, jobs in the economy, and community safety, particularly connected to gun violence because of school shootings and just shootings that have been happening in communities.
Yeah. And so you're in Philly, Allentown, and what were there other cities?
In Reading also.
Reading. So where gun violence tends to be more of an urban issue. So I'm wondering, do you have
actually, we've had similar experiences both in Allentown and Reading also, that there's been an increase. Not an increase, but there's been more that's been happening, and people have been concerned about that.
Okay, so let's sort of switch a little bit to the election. Pennsylvania has a lot of really crazy stuff going on. So how do you keep up with it all? First of all, how do you educate your communities about things like undated ballots and whether they will be counted despite efforts by Republicans to say they're not valid, or ballot curing? How do you keep people up on the latest court decision so that they know, they're able to vote safely and effectively and fairly?
Yeah, so luckily we're part of an amazing state table where we're constantly keeping track of what's going on. And through that state table, we are able to create tools and messaging. So, we do have a monthly newsletter we send out to our members. We have a WhatsApp group chat for each of the cities. In addition to that, on Facebook and other social media platforms, we share information. Urgent issues, we do phone banking. For example, last year during the general election, the polls were open later in Berks County because they had some issues with the e-poll books. And so we rapidly responded and started texting voters and calling voters to let them know that they could vote until 9 p.m. that day instead of only until 8 p.m. So those are some of the ways that we're communicating this information to voters to ensure, especially in our communities, we have monthly assemblies, also virtual assemblies with members across our 3 cities where we're sharing important information about what's happening.
That's interesting. And do you think voting is harder now than it was before, like 2 years ago, 4 years ago, or like which way is it
No.
going? Is it becoming harder or easier in Pennsylvania?
I think it was really great in 2019 when Act 77 was passed, where there was vote by mail voting that was put into place without any knowledge that we would be in a pandemic, right?
And that was bipartisan too, right?
Yes. And also being able to register up to 15 days before the election. I think the real fear is if we have a Republican governor, like all these changes that we've been able to make are going to be rolled back. I think vote by mail has added access to voting that people did not have before. It's had a huge impact on working class communities who can now drop off a ballot or mail their ballot and are not confined to polling hours. It also affects our senior citizens as well that, maybe have mobility issues and other people who are part of the disabled community. So I felt like we've made so many strides in that, and there's a lot more work to do, but that is the real fear. If a Republican governor is elected, it's going to roll back all those changes and benefits that have really opened up voting to a lot more people. So we're continuing to fight for that. We were fighting to ensure we kept vote by mail, drop boxes. Some counties have lost them, but we've been able to keep them, and some, so advocating around that. Just recently, we were advocating around drop boxes and having deputy sheriffs at them, and those sheriffs questioning people when they're returning their mail-in ballot. And we were very outspoken as to why that's intimidating to voters. So I think it's been better. But if we do have a Republican governor, that access is going to be limited, and we're going to be taking steps backwards instead of forward. Like, we should have same-day voter registration. We should have real in-person early voting. That would be amazing.
Yeah. What was I going to ask you? I think it was you. I just want to include this. I think when we were prepping for this conversation last week or whatever, you said something that really stuck with me, which was that for young people, who are first registering to vote and thinking about voting, their only experience with government is getting a driver's license. Was that you, Diana? And how?
No, I don't think that was me.
Oh God. Well, whoever it was genius. So I'll share it with you guys.
Yeah.
But they were like, the only experience is getting a driver's license. And if any of you have kids who've gone through that process, it's so hard. It's annoying. There's like 900 steps and forms and signatures and different pages and all that stuff. And whoever it was like, so you just have to tell them, no, voting isn't that. Voting is so much easier. And I just thought that is such good messaging for young people, because maybe a lot of them are not voting because they think it's like getting a driver's license, So sorry, I attributed that comment to you, but you could share it with all the young people you work with. So tell us, I know I was on your website and you feature some amazing young people doing work. Like, for example, Armando Jimenez Carbarin, who's working, I guess he's a dreamer. Is he a dreamer? Yes. And so tell us about that issue related work that you do, which I think is really important and needs to be addressed.
Yeah, the majority of our membership are immigrants, whether from Latin America, the Caribbean, and the citizenship is something that's so important to them. Like Armando, who's been living here for most of his life, being able to have DACA and hopefully in the future actual full citizenship is something that's so important. It opens up so many doors for people. And the reality is that all these folks are part of our communities already. They're contributing to our communities. They're part of our neighborhoods. And it's really a source of dignity being able to be treated equally as everyone else. So these issues are so important, but also, for example, pathway to citizenship is so important to so many of our members, to be able to not live in fear, where their own children are scared that their mother or their father is going to be deported or they're not going to come back home from work. So these issues are so important to us. And also because people are working so hard during the pandemic, we know that undocumented people, frontline workers, were the face of the pandemic. They were the ones who were ensuring that we could move forward, you know, delivering food, working in hospitals and other places. So I think it's just a sense of dignity and that they belong here. They're part of our communities, and they deserve that pathway to citizenship.
Absolutely. Yeah. What else was I going to ask you? So a lot of these people, there's a question here. Do you provide Spanish speaking volunteers for the voter hotline? And are there opportunities for non-Spanish speaking people to help you on the hotlines who are from, you know, out of state or whatever?
Yeah, so the hotline is run by one of our partner organizations, and there is a Spanish one ran by Naleo. And there are other opportunities for volunteers, and there are opportunities for non-Spanish speaking folks as well. So we will have phone bank. We're currently running phone banking opportunities, both partisan and nonpartisan. We're also recruiting volunteers who are in the area in Pennsylvania, in any of the 3 cities that we work in, who want to knock doors and go out and knock doors and get out the vote. I'll put those links here in the chat as well. But yeah, there's lots of opportunities to support and volunteer. We'll be doing text banking the day of the election, and just reminding people where to go vote and where to call if they face any issues at the polls.
And for canvassing, I know there was a question in the chat. Do you do that only on the weekends, or what times do you have for canvassing?
Yeah, so we're canvassing throughout the week and the weekends. So our times during the weekdays, we canvass 1 to 7. And then on the weekends, we do 12 to 6. When we recruit volunteers, they could do 12 to 3, 3 to 6, or vice versa. During the weekdays, they could do 1 to 4 or 4 to 7. We offer 3 blocks hours for volunteers.
Wow, that'd be great. And can the volunteer choose where to go? Like, can I say I want to go to Philly?
Yes.
Yeah, so you can do that. Go for it. Let's see. I want to make sure you see in the chat, Eco Madres is the Latino outreach program. Did you see that for Mom's Clean Air Force and the Environmental Defense Fund? And she wants to connect with you. So I want to make sure you see that. Thank you, Carolina. That is a wonderful connection, I'm sure, for Diana.
Yes, I'll put my email in the chat.
Great. Let's see. Oh, I'm just reading some other questions people have sent in. How does the big lie impact the citizens you work with?
Yeah, I think, you know, just again, the Latino community is not a monolith, right? And we have people on different sides. And I think it's just what's important is having conversations with people. And I think that's the most important thing, and understanding where people are coming from, because oftentimes people don't have the full story. They're hearing snippets of things. So I think for us, never coming at the conversation in a accusatory way, but like, how are we having a conversation to understand where people are coming from? But I think also people are often kind of it's discouraged by all of it, right? Because it's like, oh my God, this is such a mess. Like, why is all this happening? So like, how do we just stop talking about that and move forward with what needs to happen now? Because especially in the state of Pennsylvania, like, it's just been such a distraction from the real things that we need to do in the state. Continuing to have these conversations around something that's already been settled. So for us, you know, we can address it, but then move on to like, what is it that we need to do and what is it that we want to do? And really focusing on the real changes we want to see, and not continuing to follow that narrative. But it does have an impact because of this, you know, there's these audit the vote people at drop boxes, recording people and things like that. So they're creating fear. So it's really important for us to combat that, speak out against it, but also talk to voters and prepare them for those situations to know this might happen, but you still have the right to vote. You still can drop off your mail-in ballot, and being there to support them so that they're not intimidated and it doesn't stop them from participating in our democracy.
Right, right. Can you tell us a little bit, you've talked so much about the advocacy work that you do on several issues, but can you just sort of paint a picture for us? Like, what does that actually mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, all this work is to create those changes that we want to see. Like we were able to secure millions of dollars in funding for reading schools. That was really important because the schools are severely underfunded. The Home Repairs Act, that was so important in ensuring that that program was fully funded. And that happened because we had elected officials like Nikhil Saval who were championing it. So I think that for us is like a great example that we share with our membership. Like, this is why we do all this work so that this can happen. Because I think there's a disconnect sometimes, like we're knocking on doors, making phone calls, and then people forget about the election. But no, like this is sustained. Like, okay, we get people elected, then how are they going to govern? What policies are they going to support? So all of that is part of the work that we're doing, being part of those policy conversations, recommending changes and things like that. And how we ensure that government is listening to its community citizens and taking into account the changes we want to see.
So do you organize people to go to the State House or to show up at members of Congress's town halls if they do them in Pennsylvania, like all that sort of thing?
Yeah,
Like teaching them how to actually advocate?
Yeah, we've been to Harrisburg. We've done lobbying events around home repairs, around redistricting. We were part of creating unity maps that kind of showed like what our community saw their districts as. And so we were a big part of that. We gave testimony at the Legislative Reapportionment Commission hearings. And so we are actively involved in not only getting out the vote, registering voters, but also ensuring that legislative policy is passed that benefits our communities.
And how was the redistricting in Pennsylvania? Did you feel like your advocacy work around that issue, did it have impact?
Yes.
Positive impact?
We were pleasantly surprised. I think our coalition was not prepared for the impact we had. The commission took a lot of our recommendations very seriously. And a lot of what we shared was implemented. They're the most fair and equitable maps in the last 30 years. Of course, there can always be improvement, but we feel really good about it, and we're using that as a model to think about the next census. And for the first time, the census is actually requesting feedback on the census form. So I think it's amazing. All the work was done around the country around redistricting, which was a big deal. I think we're having an impact. Being in those spaces and vocalizing what was important had a big impact.
That's so, I mean, it's so valuable, right? Because then people start to see that, yes, you get involved, it does matter. Like, that's how it works, right? That's great. Wendy Rogovan asks, is there a confusion in Pennsylvania about who can vote? If you're previously incarcerated, are you allowed,
Yes.
all those kinds of issues?
Yeah, so that's something we do a lot of education around, because if you've had a felony, you can still vote in Pennsylvania. So that's often a point of confusion, but it's also often the most uplifting stories we hear from the field. Our canvassers coming back and saying, like, I talked to someone, they thought they couldn't vote because they had a felony, but I told them, no, you can vote. And like how much joy that brought to that person who felt disenfranchised and thought they could not participate. So we do a lot of education work around that. Also, if you're from Puerto Rico, there's a lot of Puerto Ricans living in Pennsylvania, particularly in Allentown, in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And so also that, yes, that they also can vote, because there's often confusion around that.
Interesting. Okay, let me see if there's any other questions. I think we're getting close to the end.
I know Wendy asked here a question around cops arresting people for voting illegally. So there has been a lot of back and forth with community organizations and the city governments around having law enforcement, particularly at drop boxes. You know, in the primary, the district attorney for Allentown had said they would have detectives at the drop boxes. To my knowledge, no one has been arrested, but there has been surveillance by these right-wing groups at drop boxes. And then in Berks County, the county had voted to have deputy sheriffs at drop boxes questioning voters when they're returning their ballot, which we were against, because again, it creates, you know, armed law enforcement at a drop box creates a atmosphere of intimidation. So we've called for, there can be other employees from the election services or from the county that can be there asking questions. But a lot of these measures have been taken into effect to kind of appease these right-wing groups who are calling fraud, fraud, fraud. But our argument is like, why are we giving any attention to that? We know there wasn't any fraud. And if a mail-in ballot is not valid, it will not be counted. So I think we haven't seen anyone be arrested, but those threats have been made.
And in Philadelphia, it's, I mean, so much power is in the counties, right, to decide everything. So each county has different rules, right? So that must be really challenging.
It is very challenging. The Department of State actually has been a pretty good ally in trying to influence what happens. You know, they have said that undated ballots should be accepted, like, but that's a back and forth, right? There's just a lawsuit put in place. And so there's been a lot of guidance from the Department of State, which has been helpful in terms of, you know, saying that surveillance or anything like that, that's intimidation, and that's illegal. Voter intimidation is illegal. But yes, it's very difficult when each county is doing, some counties will do ballot curing, other counties say they will not. So it's just, it is a mess sometimes.
You must have a huge spreadsheet is all I can say. Well, thank you, Diane. I think our time is getting short. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, your experience. Thank you for the work that you're doing. It's so important, as we know how important Pennsylvania is to the election, to saving democracy. There's some crazy candidates running in that state. So hopefully, you know, the side that wants to protect democracy will win. For those of you writing letters and listening, tuning in, thank you so much. If you want to learn more, I know there are links in the chat. If you're interested in phone banking, canvassing, learning more about this wonderful organization, please go to those links. For Big Tent USA, I can tell you that we have some amazing, so this month, October, not only Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but also for Big Tent USA, it is Pennsylvania month. So the next tent talk is on October 25th at 12 noon. We have Jen DeVore from Better Civics. She's the president and co-founder. She'll join us to discuss their important work on the ground in Pennsylvania. And Better Civics works to remove barriers of civic engagement by relaying information and engaging in dynamic ways to ensure that everyone can be more civically engaged and foster increased voter participation. The tent talk after that, the last one before the election, is on November 1st at 12 noon. We have Angelique Hinton from PA Youth Vote. She's the executive director, and she's joining us along with Zion Sykes, who's the board member of Pennsylvania Youth Vote and a student at Penn State University. So that's going to be really exciting to hear from a student. And PA Youth Vote is a nonpartisan collaboration of youth educators and organizations working to elevate youth voices, improve public school civics education, empower youth as civic actors, and they're building youth political power. It's all about the youth, people. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate the hard work that you're doing, letter writing. And Diana, again, thank you for the amazing stuff you're doing in Pennsylvania. Good luck in the last 21 days.